Happy Valentine's Day, college basketball fans, and for updated full 2023 March Madness predictions video, we have a new Bracketology update here by Joe Lunardis, and we are going to take his Bracketology and put it into our own PDF and fill it out from the first round all the way to the national championship. And before we get started, I just want to say subscribe if you guys are new. If you guys are college basketball fans or just love March Madness, this is definitely the channel for you. We are going to have daily videos, streams, shorts, full March Madness, full college basketball coverage here on the channel. You don't want to miss it. And we are going to have an updated video version of this video out every single week to 2 weeks, so you don't want to miss it. We're going to have our own personal Bracketology coming out tomorrow, so all things good. Make sure you guys subscribe, hit that like button if you guys enjoy it, and comment down below, who do you think at this point is going to win the national championship? So without further ado, let's get it started. And we have a new top overall seed here this week in the Bracketology, and that is the Alabama Crimson Tide, and they're going up against 16 seeded Alcorn State. I don't really see this upset happening. I am definitely going to take Bama here pretty easily, led by the best freshman class in the country and maybe coach of the year, Nate Oates. So now, moving on to a way more interesting matchup, we do have NC State versus FAU Florida Atlantic in the 8-9 matchup. This is a really nice matchup. NC State has a really good backcourt, and they have actually been turning up quite a bit there in the ACC. But I think FAU is good for one win this year. They have been absolutely killing it. Been a big surprise team this year. I'm going to take Florida Atlantic to pick up the victory in round one and move on to face Alabama in the next round. So next up, we do have Creighton as a 5 seed now. Creighton has been on a tear lately. Big win streak. They are playing tonight in Providence. I'm going to be streaming during that game. If you guys are watching this before that, come check it out. We'll be live at 7 p.m. But Creighton, been very hot. They have one of the best starting fives in the country, and they're starting to look like that Creighton team that we saw the potential in at the beginning of the year. They're going up against Liberty. I think whenever I was making this, Liberty might be the weakest 12 seed on here, so I think it's a really good draw here for Creighton. I'm going to take them here to win in round one and defeat Liberty. So next up, we do have Indiana versus VCU, and VCU I do think are most likely going to come out of the A10, but I do feel like it's going to be someone random, like maybe a Dayton or a St. Louis just coming out randomly from the A10. I don't right now trust any of them to get a win, especially over Indiana. I don't think they'll have anyone who's going to be able to handle Trace Jackson Davis in round one. So for that reason, I'm going to have to take Indiana. And also Indiana, a lot like Creighton, they are a hot team right now, and I think I trust them to get at least one victory over a weak team out of the A10 here in round one. So give me the Hoosiers here, and they should be able to get Xavier Johnson back by the time we get to March. So that sets up a really good matchup there in round two. Next up, we do have Iowa versus Boise State here in the 6-11 line, and this is going to be my first real upset. We did take a 9 over an 8. Not really an upset. I consider those 50-50s, but we are going to take Boise State to defeat Iowa here in round one. Iowa has shown it's tough for them to get wins in March. They usually choke, and even with Keegan Murray last year, they lost to Richmond in round one. Now they have his brother Chris Murray, who I don't think is quite as good as Keegan. I think they're very vulnerable to lose here in round one, especially to a very good Boise State team. The Broncos pick up their first ever March Madness win right here as an 11 seed and move on to the round of 32 for the first time in program history. Next up, we do have Marquette versus Hofstra, and they actually have Hofstra coming out here instead of Charleston out of that league. So very interesting there. I'm going to trust Marquette here to pick up this win and move on to the second round. Marquette's just a really good team. It reminds me of that VCU Final Four team back that was coached by Shaka Smart. Very fast pace, force a lot of turnovers. So when they get a good matchup, I think against a team like Hofstra, I like Marquette to win that one for sure. Next up, we do have Northwestern in at a 7 seed. They actually just beat Purdue on Sunday, so a really good win there for Northwestern. So now they're really secure in the field of 68, and they have Auburn in round 1. And you already saw I picked against Iowa. I'm not sure if I can trust these Big Ten teams, and I know Auburn is kind of, on a little bit of a losing streak as of late, but they've been playing really good teams. Like, it's not like they're on a losing streak losing to really bad teams. They're losing to really good teams, and I think they get a bounce back game tonight in the jungle against Missouri, and I think they'll win that one. I think they're going to get back on track, and I'm going to trust Auburn to get a win against Northwestern here. So we got 2 double-digit seeds coming out of round 1 here in this region, and I'm going to have Baylor handle the Vermont Caramounts here in the first round. If Vermont does make the tournament, though, look out for them, because this will be, I think, their 3rd tournament they made in a row now. So very impressive there. Well-coached team, just, Vermont, I don't know if they can handle Baylor. Baylor is one of the hottest teams in the country right now. They've won 10 of their last 11 in the best conference in college basketball, the Big 12. So they have been absolutely killing it. They have 3 NBA guards on their team. I don't think Baylor is going to be able to beat them. So let's go ahead and move on to our right region. We do have Purdue as our 1 seed going up against Morehead State, our 16 seed. Shout out to Morehead State, a lot like Vermont. They have made the tournament, the past few years. So very, very good coaching going on there in Morehead State. But I am going to take Purdue, of course, to win this one. I don't see them losing to a 16 seed. I think Zach Edey could put up 40 if he wanted to in round 1. Give me Purdue to win this one. This 8-9 line right here, though, is very, very interesting. Oklahoma State has actually been playing really well there in conference play as of late. Like I said earlier, Big 12, easily the best conference in college basketball. Oklahoma State is actually handling their own veteran team there. They have really good players. But I'm leaning Arkansas here. I really like Arkansas's team. They're getting Nick Smith Jr. back. I think the Mitchell brothers are going to play a big part when we get to March. This is their senior year. It's going to be huge, and I think the freshmen Anthony Black and Jordan Walsh step up as well. And I like Arkansas to win this one. With Nick Smith returning, I think that can be the difference here in this one. Give me Arkansas to move on to the next round. And I also just trust Eric Musselman in March as a coach. I think he's one of the best coaches in college basketball. And give me the Razorbacks to get past the Pokes there in round 1. But it should be a very good, close game there in that one. Next up, we do have Miami as the 5 seed going up against Southern Miss. And Southern Miss is a very solid squad. They have a really good record, and I wish this was Marshall coming out of this league, but Southern Miss, I got to give them props. They're a solid squad, and I could see this upset happening for sure. They are not a Week 12 seed. Southern Miss is a really good team, but I really like Miami this year. I think they're my favorites to make the Sweet 16 out of the ACC teams. I actually like them better than Virginia right now. Miami's playing really good basketball, and I'm going to have them move on to the next round. Next up, we do have Xavier versus Utah Valley, and Xavier, I think they have one of the most underrated starting 5s in college basketball. Sully Boom, Colby Jones, Zach Fremantle, Jack Nungy. I mean, that's a squad. And Sean Miller, first year back there as head coach of Xavier. I think Utah Valley, a Week 13 seed. Give me Xavier to move on here to round number 2. Next up, we do have Rutgers as the 6th seed going against either New Mexico or Clemson in the first 4 matchups. So first, we'll do our prediction for the first 4 matchup. I'm gonna have Clemson win this game, and I really would like to see New Mexico win a first 4 game and get in to face Rutgers, but they've been struggling as of late, and Clemson has been struggling too. But we've seen in the past, last year especially, Mountain West teams seem to struggle once they get into March. I did pick Boise State earlier, but Boise State was in the tournament last year. I think I can trust them over an Iowa team who also struggles and to get the win this year. New Mexico struggling lately, so has Clemson. I'm going to take Clemson here to win this one behind Hunter Tyson having a big game. Now for the round of 64 matchup between Rutgers and Clemson. I think that's a really good matchup. I'm going to go with Rutgers here to win this one in a close game. I don't think Clemson goes away in this one. I think Rutgers plays good defense, though, gets the job done, pulls away in the end, and moves on. Next up, we do have Tennessee as the 3 seed now, dropping after an 0-2 week, lost to 2 buzzer beaters in the same week. That's crazy, but Tennessee going up against Furman, and honestly, I don't think Furman's all that great. I would consider picking against Tennessee in the first round, especially as a 3 seed, but I'm going to take Tennessee to move on here to the second round. I think that they can handle Furman and move on to round 2. Next up, we do have Texas A&M versus San Diego State in the 7 versus 10 matchup, and this is tough because I really like San Diego State and Texas A&M this year. I'm pretty high on both of them, honestly. And I really want to pick Texas A&M to get a win in March Madness, especially with how good they have been playing in SEC play. They have been killing it, man. But San Diego State, I think they're getting a win in March this year. I'm going to take them here to win this one and beat the Aggies and move on to round 2. Next up, we do have Texas versus UNC Asheville. And I think Texas has been playing really good lately. I know they just lost to Texas Tech on the road, but that's still a very tough place to play, and every team in the Big 12 is really good, especially when you have to travel in on the road. I like Texas to win this one, and I actually really like this Texas team. They have a really good backcourt. I think Tyrese Hunter, whenever he's not playing against Big 12 opponents, like he did in the non-con this year, he has been going off. Marcus Carr has been going off all year long. They have really good athletic bigs and forwards like Dylan Mitchell, Dylan Disu, Christian Bishop, Timmy Allen. These are really good bigs that they have on their team, and I think they're very versatile on defense. I think Texas is a very tough team to beat, even without their former head coach Chris Beard, who has shown to bring a team to the national championship before, and I don't think Rodney Terry is that bad of a coach at all. I think this team is very good. Texas moves on to the second round. Now let's go to the bottom. Let's start to the bottom right region now. We got Houston as our 1 seed going up against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. That would be cool to see them make their second tournament in a row, but I don't think they will have a shot against this Houston team. Houston's too good, too nice. I really like this team. Give me Houston to win that one. Providence as our 8 seed going up against Duke as our 9 seed. And this is an interesting matchup. The 8-9 matchups I was looking at are all 50-50 matchups. The most confident one I'm in is probably Arkansas over Oklahoma State, and I'm not even that confident in that one either. All of them are really good matchups, and this one no different. Providence has been solid, but I think I'm going to take Duke in this matchup. I think Duke's going to turn up for the tournament. I really like Kyle Flipowski. I think Derek Lively has actually been starting to turn up lately and has been an anchor on the defensive end for this Duke team. They got guys, like Tyrese Proctor, who can create a shot, and then, of course, the senior veteran on that squad of freshmen, Jeremy Roach, I think is good for at least one win in March. I could see this one going down to the wire, especially considering Providence is always playing in close games. Jeremy Roach hits a mid-range from the elbow for the win in this one. Next up, we have Illinois going up against Oral Roberts in the 5 versus 12 matchup, and Illinois has a really good team, but it doesn't seem like they can put together any sort of consistency. And I do think that Oral Roberts is the strongest 12 seed out of all 12 seeds in this bracket. They have been playing amazing lately. I really like this team. We all know Max Buckets is going to show up for March Madness once again, and I'm taking Oral Roberts in this one to move on to the second round. I mean, Max Bucket's going to be there. They also have a really good anchor on the defensive end that's averaging like 4 blocks a game. I think they have a really well-rounded team, a more well-rounded team than they did 2 years ago when they went to the Sweet 16. Give me Oral Roberts to win against Illinois 12/5. Next up, we do have Iowa State versus Drake. And I don't think Drake... I do think Iowa State is prone to being upset. I actually do think that. And they actually have a really solid squad. You know, they run 4 guards, and I think that's going to be too much for Drake here in this one. The thing about Iowa State is if they have an off day, an off shooting day, they are very, very prone to being upset. Like Caleb Grill, I think Caleb Grill, you know, he's good for at least one game of being good in the tournament, along with Kalicher, the freshman Lindsley. Really good guards on that team. Holmes, like those are the 4 guards right there, and if at least 3 of them are on out of the 4, I think Iowa State will easily get past Drake. Next up, we do have St. Mary's going up against the first 4 matchup of either Mississippi State or North Carolina, and I am going to have... You know, Mississippi State, you know, doing the first 4 prediction first. Mississippi State has really good defense. How does that match up against North Carolina? I think North Carolina has the guys on their squad to be able to win that first 4 matchup. So I'm going to have UNC win that one. Then we have St. Mary's versus North Carolina in our 6 versus 11. And I'm going to have St. Mary's defeat this North Carolina team that went to the national championship game last season. St. Mary's, very solid squad. I think they're really disciplined, really fundamental. I think it's going to be enough to get past this really good North Carolina team that has just been really underperforming. I think they underperform again right now. It's not looking like they can make that deep of a run. Give me St. Mary's in this one. I could see Armando Bacot just absolutely tearing them up. Like, I could see North Carolina going on a deep run this year. But what I'm seeing on the court from them, I just can't do it. I got to take St. Mary's here in this one. Next up, we do have Kansas State as our 3 seed going up against UC Santa Barbara, and a really good matchup. You guys know I'm a huge fan of this Kansas State team. Marquise Noel, Keontae Johnson, these are super good players. They have a really good lineup, a few good bench pieces as well. But I am actually going to take a 14/3. I've said it multiple times on the channel. I think a 14 is beating a 3 this year. I don't think we'll quite see a 15/2, but I'm picking at least one 14/3, and I think Santa Barbara is the best 14 seed right now. So I'm taking the Gauchos to get a win in March Madness. They are a very solid team. They're a senior-led team. A lot of seniors in their starting lineup. Give me Santa Barbara to defeat Kansas State in round 1 in a huge, huge upset. So I do think Kansas State, and Kansas State fans, I do think Kansas State has potential to go far this year. I think they have a really fun team to watch. I enjoy watching them, but somebody's got to get upset. And right now, for this video, I'm feeling like Santa Barbara can do it, especially because Kansas State has been showing some struggles as of late. Next up, we do have Michigan State as our 7 seed going up against Nevada as our 10 seed. And I love this Nevada team. They hustle hard, and before I was looking at the bracket, I was thinking coming into it, I think Nevada could get a win in March Madness, but I don't trust the Mountain West, and especially not against a guy who has proven himself year in and year out in March Madness, and that is Tom Izzo, and Michigan State has a solid squad, so I can't do it, but I love the Wolfpack team this year. I just think Michigan State, very bad matchup for him. Give me the Sparty to move on. Also, quick break before we move on with the bracket predictions. I want to say prayers up to everyone involved in the shooting that went on Michigan State's campus. Very sad to hear, but prayers up for them. I just want to mention that real quick, but let's get back to the bracket predictions. So we do have our 2-seeded UCLA going up against our 15-seeded Eastern Washington. I don't think I trust Eastern Washington in this one. Like I said, I don't think we're going to see a 15 over a 2 for a third year in a row. I think we've been getting spoiled with those. I picked a 14 over a 3, but I'm going to have UCLA move on here in this one. So our last region for the first round, we do have Kansas as our 1 seed going up against 16-seeded Milwaukee, and I'm going to have Kansas winning this one. I don't think Milwaukee's going to be able to handle this Kansas squad. Very solid, very good team. Give me Kansas to move on. The defending national champs. Next up, we have another 50-50 8-9 matchup between Maryland and Pitt. I would love to see this matchup, but as far as making the bracket, very 50-50 game to pick, and I think I'm going to go with Maryland in this one. I'm going to go with Maryland to get a win here. They have been really hot as of late, and I do think that they have better bigs than Pitt does. I do think Pitt has the better backcourt. Maryland has the better front court. It's very 50-50, but I'm going to trust Maryland to get it done because I think bigs and rebounding and defense, I think that will travel to the tournament better than Pitt's guards scoring. So I'm going to take the Terps to win this one and move on to round number 2. Next up, we do have UConn as our 5 seed going up against 12 seed Kent State. And Kent State, I was really high on them. I'm still thinking, given the right matchup, they could get a win in March Madness. But that's if they do come out of the MAC conference, because there is teams like Toledo and Akron who are starting to turn up as well. And I think UConn is too good, too deep. I think going up against the Kent State team, I don't think UConn is very prone to getting upset. I think they're more of a team that will lose to a good team rather than, getting upset to a bad team early. Next up, we do have Gonzaga versus Yale. I'm not too high on the Ivy League this year. I'm going to take the Zags to move on to the next round. And next up, we do have Tennessee versus Memphis as our 6 versus our 11 seed. And I'm very high on this TCU team. This would be an amazing matchup to watch. Round 1. Mike Miles, he will be returning by the time we get to March Madness 100%. Versus Kendrick Davis, 2 of the best point guards in the league. Well, I guess Mike Miles is a shooting guard, but 2 of the best players in college basketball for sure. But I do think TCU is the more well-rounded team. Now, Memphis does have a really good lineup, but it's not as good as TCU's. TCU, they got Emmanuel Miller. They got Damian Ball. They got Eddie Lampkin. I think all these guys are going to turn up come March Madness. And I do think that Memphis could be prone to turning the ball over quite a bit against TCU. TCU is the number 1 team in the country when it comes to fast break transition points. And that's enough for me, man. I think I'm really high on this TCU team this year. Lost in the second round last year to Arizona. All returning from that team. I like the Horned Frogs. They're moving on to round 2. Next up, we do have Virginia versus the toothpaste Colgate. And Colgate, they're another team that from the mid-major that have made a the last few tournaments. So very impressive, good coaching going on there at Colgate. I think Virginia gets a win here, though, in March Madness. I don't think Colgate's going to beat them. I think Virginia, a very veteran, a very, disciplined team. I think they get past, a Colgate team, and if Virginia's going to lose, they're going to lose to a good team because they are, such a veteran, disciplined team. Next up, we do have 7-seed Missouri going up against 10-seeded West Virginia. And as a West Virginia fan, they do have some potential if they are playing good. And Missouri is a solid team. They're another team. They run, 4 guards in their lineup. And I think that could cause some issue for West Virginia. But if they show up to play, I think WVU can win this game. And I do like this Missouri team, but I'm a West Virginia fan. I got to have WVU at least go past round number 1. So next up, we do have Arizona versus Rider in our 2 versus 15 seed matchup. And Arizona, I do feel like they are prone to getting upset this season. I mean, we've seen them lose to Stanford, Washington State, Oregon, Utah, you name it, man. But they have won their big games. When they've gone up against good opponents, they have won. So if they can sneak past these first couple of rounds, maybe you could see a way for them to slip all the way to the Final Four. But we will see. I'm going to have Arizona defeat Rider. Don't know too much about this Rider team, to be honest, but it would definitely be a shock if they were able to beat Arizona, especially given Arizona has the best front court in college basketball in Ballo and Tubelis. So now we get to the good stuff, our second round matchups. And first off, we do have Alabama versus 9-seeded FAU. This would be a really fun matchup here. Can FAU handle the Crimson Tide, the top overall seed? I'm going to say no. I'm going to take Alabama in this one. I think it's just going to be too much for FAU in this one. Alabama has a lot of really good guards. A lot of, they have a good front court as well. And I think star Brandon Miller lights it up in this one. I could see this one being somewhat close, but give me Alabama to move on to the Sweet 16. Next up, we have Creighton versus Indiana as our 5 versus 4 seeded matchup. And this matchup right here is, I need to see this one. I need to see this matchup right here. And I think, it matches up really well. You're going to have Nembhard versus Xavier Johnson. I think Xavier Johnson could lock him up right there, at least a little bit, so that's going to be tough. But the good thing about Creighton is even if Ryan Nembhard is getting a little bit locked up, they have guys like Baylor Shireman, who is a really good facilitator from the forward position. And I really like Ryan Kalkbrenner as someone who can match up against Trace Jackson Davis. He is a really good defender and shot blocker for that Creighton team. And I think that matchup, I think he's not going to be able to stop TJD, but slow him down, and that's going to help Creighton pick up the win and move on to the Sweet 16. So, now we have Boise State versus Marquette here in our next matchup. And as much as I really like Boise State, I think Marquette is going to be too much for them in this one. So I'm going to have Marquette move on to the Sweet 16. They're another team like TCU. They like to get out in transition. They have a really good starting 5. Tyler Kolek, Cam Jones, Prosper. Very good players on that team. I think it's going to be way too much there for Boise. Next up, we have Auburn versus Baylor. And Auburn's been struggling lately. Baylor has been on a huge streak. I don't see this upset happening. I'm going to go with the Baylor Bears to pick up the win here in this one. So we have our 2, our 3, a 5 and a 1. So, this one's a little bit chalk, but I think this is going to be the only region that the Sweet 16 is, somewhat chalked. So, next round, or next region, I should say, we do have Purdue versus Arkansas to make it to the Sweet 16. This is a really good matchup. Matt Painter versus Eric Musselman, two super good coaches, and I've been thinking about this one, guys. I've been thinking about this one for, honestly, a couple hours before I even started recording this video. I had in my head, this was the matchup. Who do I want to win? And the obvious choice is Purdue, right? I mean, who's going to guard Zach Edey on Arkansas' side? I think the Mitchell brothers could, do their own, put in their all to try to stop Zach Edey. They're not going to stop him. I could see Zach Edey having a big day and Arkansas still being able to pick up the victory. This is not going to be an easy win for Purdue if they do get past them. Arkansas is going to come to play. They're going to play good defense. It's going to be a lower scoring game. And I'm going to have Arkansas win on the backs of Nick Smith Jr. coming back, Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh, the Mitchell brothers playing really good defense, Ricky Council IV. I do think their guards are better than Purdue's guards, and I think even if Zach Edey has a day, I think Arkansas can kind of stop Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith and win this game. So I really like the matchup right here. I'm going to have 9-seeded Arkansas upset number 1, Purdue, in the second round. Arkansas moves on to the Sweet 16. Next up, we do have Miami versus Xavier. This would be a really fun matchup, a 4 versus a 5, and both teams have really good lineups. You're going to see Soli Boom matched up against Nigel Pack. You're going to see Isaiah Wong matched up against Colby Jones. You're going to see Jordan Miller. You're going to see Zach Fremantle. Norchad O'Meara versus Jack Nungy. So I like Jack Nungy to win that matchup over Norchad O'Meara. And I think, Soli Boom and Colby Jones, they're going to have a game because that Miami backcourt is really good. And this one is very 50-50 to me. It's very 50-50 to me, but I'm going to ride the Miami wave right here. I really like their backcourt. I think Jordan Miller is the key to the Hurricanes' victory and leads them to their second straight Sweet 16. Made the Elite Eight last year. They're back there to the Sweet 16 this year. Next up, we do have Rutgers versus Tennessee. In this game, would probably be under 50 points for each team. I think this would be a very defensive game, both teams scoring under 50, and potentially Tennessee misses some free throws like they've been doing lately at the end of the game. Rutgers gets the ball and maybe wins due to a buzzer beater. Give me the Rutgers Scarlet Knights to win this one in the second round and move on to the Sweet 16. You guys know I do not trust the Tennessee fraudineers. I tried to come up with a joke, but you guys know that I do not trust the Tennessee frauds in March Madness, and I think this Rutgers team playing really good defense behind their anchor and Cliff Amorie. Give me Rutgers to move on to the Sweet 16. So next up, we do have San Diego State going up against Texas. And that's a fun matchup right there. San Diego State will come out with a really good defensive game plan for this team. But I think Texas is, I mentioned earlier, their athletic forwards are going to be too much for the San Diego State team. And I do think that Tyrese Hunter turns up in March Madness. If Tyrese Hunter doesn't have to go up against a Big 12 opponent, I think he's probably going to turn up and play super good. So I'm going to take Texas here to win this one. Next region, we do have Kansas versus Maryland. And honestly, I think Maryland could possibly actually pull this off. They have a very well-rounded team, but I think Daquan Harris is going to be facilitating amazingly. I think Jalen Wilson has a good day. I could see KJ Adams, really help doing his own part, against those really good Maryland bigs. I'm going to take Kansas to move on to the Sweet 16. Next up, we do have UConn versus Gonzaga, Sinogo versus Timmy. There's some really good matchups in there as well. Strother going up against probably Andre Jackson Jr. That's a good matchup. And it really all depends, what UConn team are we going to see? Are we going to see the team that beat down on Marquette last week, or the team that looked pretty terrible? Andre Jackson Jr. looked terrible in the Creighton game in the same week. So which UConn team are we going to see? I'm gonna say UConn. I picked them to win the national championship in my last bracket. I picked them to win the national championship, or make the Final Four at least. And I think all my brackets, and right now they're just not showing me the consistency I need. And I do think that Gonzaga has the type of lineup that if UConn plays an off day, they can definitely win. So I'm going to take the Zags to defeat UConn in this one. You think about it, yeah, UConn has Donovan Clingan as well, but Gonzaga has a 7-foot freshman as well. Actually, he might be a sophomore, but Ben Gray is a guy who is huge, and he can shoot the 3-ball from the top of the key. So I think Gonzaga actually matches up pretty well with UConn. I'm going to take the Zags to move on to the Sweet 16. Next up, we do have TCU versus Virginia, and this is another super good matchup. 6 versus 3, but it feels like, a 2 versus 3 or a 3 versus 4, something in there, because TCU is a lot better than a 6 seed with Mike Miles back in the rotation. These are two veteran teams, two very solid teams, and I think TCU has, the more of the star power in this matchup. But here's the big key to this game. TCU, I mentioned earlier, they like to get out in fast breaks, transition buckets. That's their game. They're the best in the country at that. Virginia, very veteran team, senior lineup. Will they turn the ball over that much against TCU? They're going to be told by Tony Bennett to protect the basketball in this game. This will be a really fun matchup to see who comes out on top. I'm going to take TCU because I believe guys like Isaac McNeely, the freshman, you got Ben Vanderplas. These guys could be vulnerable to turning the ball over. I think Armand Franklin is the X factor for this team, and he could potentially turn the ball over as well. So I'm going to take TCU to win this one and move on to the Sweet 16. Next up, we do have West Virginia going up against Arizona in the second round. I mentioned earlier, Arizona could be prone to some upsets, potentially in March Madness, given who they have lost to. But I think Arizona matches up pretty well against this West Virginia team. I think Krista could have a big game shooting. I think Turbellis has a massive game in this one, being guarded by Trey Mitchell, who, as a West Virginia fan, I love him, but he's not the best defender. I think Turbellis could tear him up, and I'm going to take Arizona to win this one and set up a rematch from last year's round of 32 matchup that was a classic in the Sweet 16 between TCU and Arizona. Next up, we do have Houston versus Duke in round 2, and this would be really fun to see. I mean, I know Duke hasn't performed all that great this year, but they're still, a solid team, and they're still the Duke Blue Devils, and I think they'll put up a fight against this Houston team, but I am going to have Houston ultimately come out on top. I mean, this Houston team is so stacked. I say it a lot. This team reminds me of like an NBA type of team. where they drive and kick. All their players are 3-and-D players. Super solid squad, and I love this team. Jarris Walker is turning up, man, turning up, and he is becoming a star on this Houston team. And not to mention, they also have a veteran-led backcourt that is one of the best backcourts in the nation. I love this Houston team to go far, and I have them picking up the victory over Duke. Next up, we do have Oral Roberts going up against Iowa State. Can Maxi Buckets get back to the Sweet 16, man? Can he do it? Iowa State, they have a solid squad. I think Asana Sunny matched up against Oral Roberts, really good big that gets blocks. Could be a difference, Osana Sunny might be one of the best centers that Oral Roberts guy has seen this season. So I don't know about the matchup here for Oral Roberts. I think Iowa State, they have a lot of guards that they could switch on with Max, if he's getting screen set for him. Iowa State can switch everything. So for that reason, I really wanted to take Oral Roberts to move on to the Sweet 16, but I'm going to take Iowa State. I like the matchup for them, and I'm going to take the Cyclones to make the Sweet 16 for the second year in a row. 2 years as head coach for Otzelberger, 2 years in the Sweet 16, if this comes true. Next up, we have St. Mary's going up against UC Santa Barbara. And we got to have a Cinderella, man. We got to have a Cinderella. And I'm going to take the Gauchos to defeat St. Mary's in a very close, good game. Down to the wire, Gauchos move on to the Sweet 16, probably for their first time in program history. Don't know that for sure. You guys can fact check me, but I would say probably so. In a big time upset, again, 14-seeded Santa Barbara is in the Sweet 16. Next up, we do have Michigan State versus UCLA, and this would be another fun matchup. Tom Izzo in March is scary, man. Is scary for sure. And I think he has a good squad, with Joey Hauser, Malik Hall getting back in the rotation, getting back into it. You got Tyson Walker, who could hit a big shot. But then on UCLA's side, you got a veteran point guard in Tiger Campbell. You got Jamie Yaquez. You got Amari Bailey, the freshman. You got Jaden Clark. UCLA, I think, has a more rounded out roster. And I think Tiger Campbell is a veteran enough point guard where he's going to be able to slow down Tyson Walker, in my opinion, and I think he's going to win that matchup, and I think Tiger Campbell is the reason UCLA moves on to the Sweet 16 this season. So our Sweet 16 is set, and it is turning out to be a good one. So let's head to our first matchup. We have Alabama going up against Creighton. Can Creighton make their first Elite Eight in program history? This would be their second Sweet 16 in program history, if I'm not mistaken, and probably their best roster that they have ever had. And how do they match up against this Alabama team, that has Mark Sears? They got Bradley, they got Quinterly, they got Brandon Miller, they got Noah Clowney. I think that Kalkbrenner could be a force down low and could be a difference maker in this game. I also think that Baylor Shireman matched up on Brandon Miller could be a good matchup, because I don't think Baylor Shireman's going to stop Brandon Miller, but, he could match him on the offensive end, and they could, kind of cancel each other out in that situation. And I do think that Trey Alexander and Ryan Nembhard, them together as a pair might be better than Alabama's guards. So I like the matchups. I like Creighton turning up lately, and I'm going to take them to upset Alabama in the Sweet 16 and move on to their first Elite Eight in program history. Let's go. Next up, we do have Marquette versus Baylor, and this would be an insane matchup. We've seen this earlier in the year where Marquette beat down on Baylor, man, and that was in Milwaukee. Could they repeat that? Given how much Baylor has improved since then, I don't think it's going to be quite that easy, man. I don't think it's going to be quite that easy. Baylor, like I said, they've won 10 of their last 11 in the Big 12, and I don't think it's going to be quite that easy. And I know Marquette has beaten Baylor earlier in the season, so you might like that matchup, but I'm gonna say Baylor has been playing really good as of late. 3 NBA guards on their team. I think they protect the ball a lot better than they did the first time against Marquette. But Marquette still picks up the victory in the rematch. I like the matchups for this Marquette team, and even though Baylor protects the ball better than they did in the first matchup, this Baylor team is still turnover prone, and I think it will be too much there for them. And in a close game this time, Marquette moves on to the Elite Eight to set up a Big East matchup, 5 versus a 3 seed in the Elite Eight. So already, not even to the Elite Eight, and we have 2 1 seeds going down already. So next up, we have Kansas versus Gonzaga in this one, and very solid matchup right here. And I honestly kind of like the matchup here for Gonzaga. I think Drew Timme matched up on KJ Adams. That could be a good matchup there. But the problem is, I think Kansas's guards, not only Daquan Harris, Kevin McCullough, but also guys like Bobby Pettiford could be too much for these Gonzaga guards. And as long as KJ Adams can hold his own against Drew Timme, I'm going to take Kansas to win this one, and a big game by Jalen Wilson here gets the defending national champions back to the Elite Eight. Next up, we do have TCU going up against Arizona in a rematch from last year's round of 32 at Classic, and this would be really fun, man. And I really like TCU in this matchup. I think Eddie Lampkin can have a big game like he did last year in this matchup against those Arizona bigs. And I also think Emmanuel Miller could have a really good game at the forward position for the TCU team. And I like this TCU team. I think in the rematch, they get the win this time, and another really, really close game. Give me the Horned Frogs to move on to the Elite Eight. So we have a Big East matchup in the Elite Eight, and we have a Big 12 rematch in the Elite Eight. The way this is setting up is crazy, but it would be super entertaining. Next up, we do have Arkansas versus Miami, and this would be another fun one, man. I've been riding Arkansas, all the way to the Sweet 16 from the 9 seed, but can they get another step further over 5-seeded Miami, who has a super, super solid squad? And can Arkansas make their 3rd Elite 8 in a row? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take Miami in this matchup. I think that Miami's guards kind of match up really well with Arkansas's guards, and I do think, if Arkansas had Nick Smith Jr. in this lineup all year long, and they had, Trayvon Brazile, that would be huge. And I do think Arkansas could be national championship contenders if they didn't have those injuries. But I'm going to take Miami in this one. Unless Nick Smith Jr. comes back and he's absolutely lighting it up, then I like Miami in this matchup. And I think Norchad Omier helps down low on the Mitchell brothers. And I'm going to take Miami here to move on to their 2nd straight Elite 8. So next up, we do have Rutgers versus Texas, and I like this Rutgers team. I wrote them down here to the Sweet 16, but I think Texas is too much for them. I do think that Cliff Amorie down low is a good matchup against these really athletic bigs and forwards for this Texas team, but I think the problem here is Texas has a super good backcourt in Tyrese Hunter and Marcus Carr, where I'm not going to be able to take Rutgers in that one. I know Caleb McConnell, he is one of the best wing defenders in college basketball as well, but will Rutgers have enough offense in this game? That's kind of what I'm worried about right here. I'm going to take Texas to move on to the Elite Eight. Next up, our final Sweet 16 matchups, we have Houston versus Iowa State, and this is another super fun matchup. You got, the 4-guard lineup for Iowa State. You got Kalicher, Lindsley, you got Caleb Grill, you got Holmes, and you got a Houston team that plays lockdown defense and a team that is very long and lengthy, and I think it's a really good matchup for this Iowa State team. I think Houston's going to be able to force a lot of turnovers, and I don't think Iowa State is winning this game. Give me Houston to move on to the Elite Eight. And next up, we do have Santa Barbara as a 14 seed marching down to the Sweet 16 and facing UCLA in this matchup, the 2 seed. And I think UCLA is too much, and I think they're going to be able to handle the Santa Barbara team and move on to the Elite Eight. So let's take a look at our Elite Eight matchups. We do have Creighton as a 5 seed versus Marquette as a 3 seed. And we do have Kansas as a 1 seed versus TCU as a 6 seed. Then we have Miami as a 5 seed versus Texas as a 2 seed. And we have Houston as a 1 seed going up against UCLA as a 2 seed. So we have a 1-2, a 1-6, a 5-3, and a 5-2. So no double digits seeds get to the Elite Eight. But still some really intriguing matchups going on here in the Elite Eight. So our first one, we do have our Big East matchup between Creighton and Marquette. And this would be a fun one. We've seen it once already. Marquette did win at home. We're going to see round 2 Saturday in Omaha. And Creighton is a very hot team right now. And I think they match up well against this Marquette team, and I'm going to go with Blue Jays. I'm riding this team, man. I really like their starting 5. I think they have one of the best starting 5s in college basketball, and I really like this team. Cockbrenner, Kaluma, Baylor Shireman, the guard duo of Nimard and Trey Alexander. That is maybe the best starting 5 in college basketball. Love this Creighton team, and I'm taking them to make it to the Final Four. Right, next matchup to get to the Final Four, we do have Kansas versus TCU, our Big 12 showdown. This would be matchup number 3 between those two teams. We're yet to see matchup 2, but in the first matchup, TCU beat down Kansas in Fog Allen, and Kansas has looked a lot better since then, and also Mike Miles has had that injury, but like I said before, he will be back for this game, and I really like this TCU team, man. I like this TCU team a lot, and I think I'm going to have to go. It's tough because I really wish I could see the second matchup between these two teams before I make this pick. But I'm going to go with TCU, given they beat Kansas by, 20 points earlier in the season on the road. I think this TCU team is legit, guys, and I'm going to have them make what I think is their first Final Four in program history, along with Creighton making their first Final Four in program history. So 2 first going on, and one of them is going to make their first ever national championship game. 5 versus 6 seed to make the championship game. Let's go. Next up, we do have Miami going up against the Texas Longhorns. And again, I think Norchad Omier would not do that great against all these Texas bigs. I think it's too much, but I do think Jordan Miller, Isaiah Wong, Nigel Pack, they could all have games. So I think this is going to come down to the wire 100%. But I think it's going to be Tyrese Hunter and Marcus Carr that actually help get this one and finish it down the stretch. And Texas is making the Final Four, even without Chris Beard, Rodney Terry doing a hell of a job there and getting them to the Final Four. Next up, we do have Houston versus UCLA in a 1 versus 2 matchup, and this UCLA team is super, super good. Houston is our last chance for a 1 seed to make the Final Four. We have a 5 seed, a 6 seed, and a 2 seed. Can Houston be the only 1 seed in the Final Four? And again, I really like this Houston team. I think they have a lot of really good 3-and-D type of players, really long, lengthy. They play aggressive on the defensive end, and I think that matchup between Tiger Campbell and Jamal Sheed is going to be amazing. 2 really good veteran point guards, and I think Marcus Sasser can have his way with guys like Amari Bailey. I'm sure they're probably going to put Clark on Sasser, which I think is a really good move there by UCLA, and put some length there on Sasser. But Jarris Walker down low, man, I don't know. I think Houston has way too many good pieces. They play aggressive. They're lengthy. I like Houston here to make it to the Final Four. So we have a Big East representation here in Creighton. We got 2 Big 12 teams in TCU and Texas, and we have Houston out of the AAC conference. And I love this Houston team this year, and they're going to be a really, really tough out, man. A really, really tough out. So our first matchup, we do have Creighton versus TCU. Is the 5 seed or the 6 seed going to make it to the national championship game for the first time in program history? And I like both of these teams a lot. As you can tell, I got them both here in the Final Four. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this Creighton team to get it done here in this one and make it to the national championship game. I like this Creighton team. Ryan Cockbrenner matched up on Eddie Lampkin. I think he could do a really good job in that matchup. I think Kaluma and Shireman matched up against guys like Emmanuel Miller. They're going to do a great job. And then you have Trey Alexander, who is a really good defender, matched up on Mike Miles. He's not going to be able to stop Mike Miles, but he can slow him down enough. And then you have Ryan Nembhard and Damian Ball, who are both really good point guards, but I like Ryan Nembhard in that matchup as well. So I'm going to take the Creighton Blue Jays to make it to the national championship. Even after all their struggles, they're turning up right now. Let's see it happen. They're in their first ever national championship. Let's go. Next matchup, we have a battle of the Texas teams, 1 seed versus a 2 seed here in this one. And again, this is the type of matchup that Texas does not want to see. I mentioned all tournament long in this predictions video that Texas, their big advantage is all of those athletic forwards and bigs. Well, Houston has a ton of athletic forwards who are 3-and-D type of players. They're just like an NBA team where they're going to be able to guard and stop that. And not to mention, Houston is one of the most aggressive teams on defense in the country. And it's all going to come down to, in my opinion, it's all going to come down to who wins the guard matchup. Will it be Jamal Sheed and Marcus Sasser, or will it be Marcus Carr and Tyrese Hunter? That matchup I would love to see, and I'm going to say that Jamal Sheed and Marcus Sasser win that matchup and help their team move on to the national championship game. So we have Creighton, we have Houston. It's different. Last year we had all blue blood Final Four. This year we have 0 blue bloods in our Final Four. and it sets up a really fun matchup. Will Houston win their first national championship since when they had Hakeem Olajuwon back in the day, or will Creighton win their first ever national championship game after making their first ever Elite Eight, first ever Final Four, and first ever national championship game? I like this matchup for the Houston Cougars, and I am going to have them be my 2023 national championships up to this point of the season. As of February 14th, I have the Houston Cougars winning the national championship. And let's go over the matchup. So you have Jarris Walker, who will probably be matched up against Ryan Cockburner sometimes, or maybe sometimes Arthur Kaluma. Both super good defenders, so I could see him struggling early and turning it on later, but it is good that he is able to stretch the floor, and if he is playing the 5 and does have Cockburner guarding him, he is going to be able to stretch the floor, maybe bring Cockburner out of the paint. That's going to be huge for this Cougar team. Then I do think that Sasser and Sheed matched up against Alexander and Nembhard. I think the advantage for the backcourt goes to Houston in those matchups. And then you think about it, Houston has those really long defensive forwards who are very aggressive. They are going to be hassling Baylor Shireman in this game. So I like Houston to win this one. And I think this Creighton team has a type of run like the Gordon Hayward Butler team back in 2010, and Creighton has that type of run there with Baylor Shireman and company. And I really like this team. Creighton makes the national championship. Houston beats them in it. Like the way this Final Four turned out. But let me know who at this point, in your guys' opinion, given this bracket, do you think would come out and make the national championship? And if you want, let me know who you think would be in your Final Four given this bracket as well in the comment section below. But make sure you guys subscribe. That is going to do it for this video. Like I said, non-stop college basketball March Madness coverage here on the channel. You don't want to miss it. So hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching.